This is the CreaseCast.
All right, folks, welcome to episode number 134 of the CreaseCast. I am your host, Cody Stevenson. With me, as always, the man that built that place, Lachlan Irvin. Man, we had a bit of a crazy day on Wednesday, which, I don't know.
Did we?
I don't know about you, but if
Did anything
this
happen on
week
Wednesday? I fell asleep
absolutely
at like
dragged. Did it? I mean, I guess you're like chilling in California, fucking soaking up the rays.
So here's what happened, right? I don't know why, but lately I've been having some like insomnia issues.
Okay.
And on Tuesday night before free agency, and I had texted you earlier that day that I was like, I forgot that UFA was that quick. I thought it was maybe like I thought it was maybe today, if any day. So before we did the Tuesday show, and that night, for whatever reason, just couldn't sleep at all. I think I got maybe 30 minutes of sleep. I come upstairs here to where I'm recording from today, at about 8 or maybe like not even like 7. Like I get up here at 7. I haven't slept at all. Feed the dogs, and then I immediately just kind of like I'll see if I can take like a 30-minute nap on the couch.
Mm-hmm.
I wake up at about 10:30 a.m. and all hell is broken loose. And I was so behind on everything. And I'm like, oh no.
Yeah. I was trying, like, this week is end of the month and it's our like quarterly like review kind of time. So I was slammed at work. Mm-hmm. So trying to manage like a company's inventory during the most like busy time of the year as the same day as like $800 million worth of contracts are being signed across the league. Trades are popping off all over the place. Like, I could not fathom how much action was going on and how frustrating it was to have to be able to have to work for a living. Because, man, we're going to get into it. But the Canucks had a bit of a free agency day. They won the day.
Their inventory.
Yeah, did they ever? They had to stock up 2 separate locations in their NHL team and their AHL team. Yeah. But as we were just saying before we started recording this show, the Canucks somehow managed to both win free agency day and horribly lose it.
That does feel like a really good way of putting it. They did so many things right, but they also did a few things very wrong.
Yes.
Yeah, as they always tend to.
And the funny thing was, too, is the free agency day for them really kind of started like maybe like the night before or maybe 2 days before, whenever it was, when they signed their most recent draft pick, Danila Klimovich, to his 3-year entry-level contract. And it was like, oh, they're really rushing through this to get this kid playing either in the QMJHL or in... I mean, hell, maybe the NHL or the AHL. That's kind of like the trajectory the kid thinks he's ready for, is to go from the Belarusian second league straight to the NHL. Power to him. I mean, hell yeah, go for it, dude.
Yeah, it arguably just started over the week. Like it was kind of it felt like the day that everyone got signed was kind of just that was almost the end, like the ending in a way, like, because there was the Nate Schmidt trade leading up. There was the Holtby buyout. That all kind of I feel like that all melded together. That's all kind of part of the same package.
Yeah. Like it all kind of culminated in the Nate Schmidt trade when they got rid of him. And then the Klimovich entry-level contract got signed, and that kind of kickstarted the next part of the Canucks week, where you're kind of just like, okay, they're thinking really far ahead here. They don't want another Vasily Podkolzin situation where he's trapped in the KHL, barely playing. He's clearly like an NHL caliber talent, but he's kind of unfortunately stuck in this contract situation. They're trying to avoid that with this entry-level contract, and everyone's going, hey, this is great. Like, the Canucks are really thinking ahead. They want their hands on for this next prospect of theirs, because they kind of need this next prospect, Klimovich, to really work out, considering they haven't really picked within the top 100 of either this draft or the last draft before it. So this is really good. And then 9 a.m. UFA day started for them. And A lot of it was very good. They signed 17 contracts total, which was the most of the day, but they were the only team on top of Seattle, actually, that was basically building an AHL team from scratch and restocking their NHL squad. So they had a lot of contracts to dish out, and they got a lot of good depth pieces, a lot of proven scorers. So their Abbotsford Canucks team is actually going to be probably pretty legit, right from the out the gate, which is, I mean, that's a smart call. You can't half-ass your brand new farm team inside the market.
Which is kind of interesting just because, technically they don't have to do that, right? Technically, in theory, they could have just, depending on, maybe not necessarily with all of the players they've chose yesterday, but in theory, they could have, left that up to, Ryan Johnson and gone to him and just said, okay, find some AHL guys to sign to AHL contracts that aren't going to come on, be part of Vancouver's salary cap situation in any kind, what have you. So they really swung for the fences on not just finding guys who could fill the Abbotsford team, as well as trying to find as many low cost contracts that could potentially make their way up to playing NHL games, which is frankly such a long time coming. We've been asking for that for a very long time to find your Jace Howard-Lucks before they come, your Carter Verhaeghes before they turn into Carter Verhaeghe. This is kind of what they went for here a little bit, to a certain extent. Maybe not so many surefire NHLers coming up through this ranks, but
they cast a wide net.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
That was the key, and that's kind of been the what people have been begging for with the draft picks thing, right? Stop trading them away. The more lottery picks you have, the better chances you have that they're actually going to play out. In this case, they've signed a shit ton of two-way deals with a lot of guys that are typically tweeners, guys in the 24 to 28 range who are really good, proven AHL scorers and pretty decent rate scorers at the NHL level, but they just don't have that thing that keeps them in the NHL full time. And because they've cast a wide net, I mean, shit, maybe it works out. Maybe Nick Patan gets a call up because Brandon Sutter's injured himself for the 7th straight year. Ooh. And he gets a look on the 4th line. You have no idea, right?
Yeah, you gotta be careful. You gotta you gotta have your contingency plans in place as always, especially Vancouver. We know more than anything that Vancouver has really struggled with injury luck over the last so many years, with the one exception being that 2019-20 team where the whole team pretty much stayed healthy for most of the year. You didn't have a lot of significant losses. And then because you go into last year where everybody got hurt.
And because of that 2019-20 team that was so bizarrely healthy, you had their AHL team develop a shit ton of chemistry because no one was getting called up because they didn't have the space. They had no reason to call anyone up to begin with. So you had this goal scoring phenom of a lineup that was one of the best in the AHL that unfortunately had their season cut short. Yeah. And a lot of criticism has been levied at the ownership group for appearing to cheap out on their farm team. And I mean, proof's in the pudding. They've basically been outsourcing it to middle of nowhere Utica, New York, and letting that management group handle everything while their kind of hands are off. They sign the two-way contract NHL contracts and let them pay for the rest. This isn't really the case now with this AHL team. It really looks like they're kind of pulling the Toronto Maple Leafs approach, where they're we're going to sign as many guys to two-way deals and expensive AHL contracts, and we're going to go for a championship because money usually wins in the AHL. It's an uncapped league. So if you spend a lot of money and then you invest, you're probably going to see the results. This is kind of the reason why Syracuse Crunch are always very good. It's the reason why the Dallas Stars organization is usually really good. It's just the way it works sometimes.
And it's usually why a lot of those players end up finding their way onto, maybe not always to Dallas and Tampa, but always to other parts of the NHL and end up finding regular jobs later on.
Correct. So why don't we, before we get it, we don't want to hammer on the negative this early. It's still very fresh. So we're going to stick with the positives. So we're going to go over some of the positive, the good of UFA signing day for the Canucks. So I'll start. because this one is great. I got unnecessarily hyped up by this because of Thomas Drantz, and apparently, I guess Thomas Drantz like has like good connections with Brady Keeper because of his time in Florida. Has nothing but good things to say about him. He's Pimichikamak Cree Nation from Cross Lake, Manitoba, absolute middle of nowhere Manitoba. I cannot wait if he's actually going to play in Abbotsford. I'll be able to talk with him about like his heritage, like this.
I'm
rocks.
very excited. I'm excited for you, dude. Like just in terms of like just the fact that the Abbotsford team's coming, it's going to be very fun for you to go into those games. And now you got Brady Keeper.
And now I got Brady Keeper there to like just like talk to him about like shit. Like I don't even know like his heritage. Like I just want to ask him like what like are you going to pull an Ethan Bear and try and get CreaseCast on an Abbotsford AHL jersey or a Canucks jersey if you manage to earn yourself a call up? Because the way that like guys like Thomas Drantz and like some of the analytics folks on Twitter were talking about him, like they have me convinced he's going to somehow beat out like Tucker Pullman for a spot or beat out Luke Shen or something like that. So I'm unnecessarily hyped up for it. So for that, this was my first pick as number one good. But yourself?
Well, I wanted to ask you about Keeper because you saw him a little bit with Syracuse this year. What did you see from him that you liked about his game from watching so many games with him involved?
He just looked stable. Like he didn't look like in the AHL last season. Like you could really tell like the junior players from actual like AHL vets or guys that like are actually more established veterans. Like there's a calmness and a poise to his game that sticks out when you compare it to say Tyler Tucker, who was like a 20-year-old making his debut out of the OHL. He would, be really reckless, be really physical, but then there'd be moments where he would just like stop moving his feet and just like watch other teams try and score on him right in front of his crease, and he would just like be completely zoned out. And then you have guys like Brady Keeper on the other hand, who are just like, they know what they're doing. They're not like parking their feet and like not trying. So there's like a totally different thing. So I have, as far as I'm concerned, like they look good. Yeah, I think he scored a goal against the Comets at one point or got an assist. I can't remember, but yeah, pretty excited for him to see him against like actual AHL competition instead of like a bunch of junior players. Yeah, he's got really good scoring rates at the AHL level too. He's only been given, I think, 2 NHL games like so far in his career, but hey, this is why you cast a wide net. You never know what's going to happen. And given everything that's going on in the culture of Canada in regards to all these discoveries of, mass graves at residential schools across Canada, to sign like a player like Brady Keeper, like in the midst of this, to show like, these groups of people, like they're not forgotten. Like we respect you, we value you. And what better way to be like, yeah, this guy's like actually going to be really good. You should be excited for him. So I'm hyped.
Okay. Fair enough. Those are all great points. I think for me, I guess we'll start. I guess you know what? Let's start with the other guy that I think got everyone hyped, but at the end,
literally everybody,
literally everyone's excited for this guy. It's Luke Shen, baby. He's coming back officially.
You know that meme where it's like the Predator handshake, and it's like they're all like ripped and stuff. It's like one side is like Benning Bros, the other side is Bitter Bros, and then the center is signing Luke Shen to a league friendly deal.
Exactly.
He's one, like as you said on our last episode, because we were like speculating that he would be signed to a league minimum deal, and we were like, I don't think anyone would have a problem with that because everyone liked him and he was exactly as advertised. Just like cheap defender, good, responsible, big, throws hits. That's all he was advertised as. He wasn't like Jim Benning trying to talk about Jalen Chatfield and just being like, yeah, he's Troy Stetcher. Don't worry about it, guys. And everyone being disappointed. It's like Luke Shen, baby. Yeah. And he's back 2 years, $850K or something like that. It's like dirt cheap. Like that rocks.
Dirt cheap. And look, he fills 2 very important quotas for everybody.
Hits per
for
60.
us, he for like, for the analytics people and everybody else, he fills the cheap cap depth kind of situation. He fills that role. 850 per year for a guy with as much NHL experience as Luke Schenn has is incredible. That's great. That's great. That's exactly what you want. And he's a guy that can, he makes the big hits for the fans, and for the management team, he brings that Stanley Cup pedigree that they love so much. He's got 2 championships in the last 2 years.
Stanley Cup
multiple cups over. This guy was the glue that held.
He's the reason why
together. Yes,
Nikita Kucherov could only score 30 points in 17 games because Luke Schenn had his back.
There.
Exactly. That's what everyone's takeaway was from the playoffs.
Exactly. That was that Tampa won't win a cup again just because now Schenn's gone. As long as
they brought back Zach Bogosian though, so they might have a chance.
True.
Still.
They might.
Zach Bogosian and Luke Schenn formed one of the most dynamic third pairing defensemen on a cup challenger or winner ever when Tampa first won their cup. Okay, so I typed this out to you because I was like, I have a feeling I'm pretty sure Tampa's going to three-peat here, and I think they're pretty well set up to do so. And then as I was typing that out to you, I was like, wait, these guys won 2 Stanley Cups in less than 12 months.
Oh, yeah.
That's insane.
It is insane, and you will never see it again. Well, hopefully you'll never see it again. I mean, there's already talk of wave number 4 coming. But
200 cases today reported. People, please get vaccinated for the love of Christ.
I'm pretty sure everyone can. Please
get. I just don't want to do another lockdown in August.
No more. I can't. Not again. I'm admittedly a very introverted person. This has been too much for me. Okay, with Schenn, this is a guy who would be perfect on your third pairing, especially as a team that's, the Canucks are talking about a team that wants to, wait and see. They're not, that wants to go for the playoffs and see what happens kind of team. And whether or not you agree that that's the best way to approach it, if you're going to do that, how you want to do it is find as much cheap depth as you possibly can, especially on your blue line, with guys that can complement your offensively minded defenders like Quinn Hughes, like Jack Rathbone, and have somebody who's steady, a steady stay-at-home defenseman who works there, who's not going to be, not going to be a concern when they're on the ice, that they're going to be a net negative, from being out there.
Right.
Schenn fills that very well. He's a guy that had to really I don't know if rehabilitate is the right word here, but he was a guy that, went early in I believe was a former first rounder with Toronto. He was a guy that was, he was expected to be a very different defenseman than he ended up being, but in the last few years, he's really changed what the perception of what he is to something that is that fits his role and fits his style of play a lot better. And it really is perfect for what the Canucks need. Having that defensive presence back there. He's not going to blow you away. He's not going to be the greatest shutdown defenseman of all time or anything. But they don't need him to be that. They just need him to be serviceable and helpful to when they pair him with a Rathbone or a Hughes.
Yeah, so long as they don't, try to get him to play a role that he's not fitting. If they put him on the ice and we're like, oh hey, be a shutdown guy, a shutdown matchup guy against elite competition, he's not going to succeed. But if they find that perfect middle ground, they found when he first debuted with the Canucks and kind of just was the tough guy, the tough, responsible stay-at-home guy while Quinn Hughes darted around the offensive zone, then he's going to be fine. You don't have to worry about it. And for $800K, you love it. Why not? On that same kind of note, there was another defenseman they signed, which I thought was a really good pickup, which was Brad Hunt. He's a journeyman player. He's played all around the league. He actually started in the Canucks system with the Chicago Wolves. Yeah, he started with the Chicago Wolves back when the Wolves were their affiliate. He actually debuted in a year in which Nolan Baumgartner was still playing. And now he's
How
like
old
his
is
coach.
How old is Brad Hunt?
Brad Hunt is 32. So he debuted out of the NCAA in 2010
Nolan
or 2011.
Baumgartner and Brad Hunt don't seem to line up in that with that in mind. Like that just seems impossible. That seems impossible to a
You don't want to see what seems even more impossible. Sure. When Brad Hunt debuted in the Chicago Wolves, one of the main players for the Canucks AHL team at that time was Zach Cashin and Jordan Schrader.
Oh, I was gonna say Eddie Lach, but oh wow.
Oh, he might have been. I didn't scroll that far down on the Elite Prospects page.
If he was in the Chicago Wolves, yeah, he would have just been there right around the Eddie Lach year. It looks like, around that time.
He's one of those like guys who's like actually like surprisingly pretty good in prescribed minutes. I think he's, if I remember correctly, he's had like 28 point seasons, an 18 point season, like as of recent, like within the last 4 years. You know what's also crazy about Brad Hunt? He was a part of the Vegas Golden Knights inaugural season, and he had something like 19 or 20 something points.
I remember that. He was
but he didn't play any playoff games.
So what happened with Brad Hunt, if I remember correctly, is he was the guy that I believe the Wild, they agreed to take from the Wild in order to protect, I want to say Clayton Stoner
Spurgeon, Spurgeon Stoner. Maybe.
It was something. Yeah, it was something along those lines. They wanted.
It would have been Spurgeon, I think. So they probably said
it was Pettersson. I think it was Greg. It was either him or Greg Pettersson because Spurgeon, I don't think, was old enough to be protected at that point. I don't think he was been around in the league long enough. And what they ended up getting from the Wild was also Alex Tuck, and I think did they get Eric Holla from them as well? I think something like that.
I feel like they got.
There was something weird there where essentially the Wild were one of the teams that gifted the Knights that great team right out of the gate. It was something where like, and then in hindsight, it was one of the reason also I know it wasn't Jared Spurgeon is because I knew it wasn't Jared Spurgeon as well, is because the idea was that the Wild. Who the Wild chose to protect for that deal ended up completely not being worth it. So like Spurgeon would have been worth it if you were protecting Spurgeon. Right. It was somebody else, somebody who was not as necessary for the Wild's success as Jared Spurgeon. But yeah, I remember Hunt in the early year, that was in that very first year, being a huge part for them. You're right. Did not play any playoff games. He had 7 points the next year. He ended up going back to the Wild. He was a Blues pick or something. Interesting. Just looking at it, like trying to look at the schedule, but just trying to line it up. That old Knights team will be an interesting, exploration in a few years. But yeah, he was expansion.
Yeah, he's been around the league.
Do you think he challenges for a spot on the Canucks? Like how much do you think he challenges for a spot
on this defense? Probably puts up a good fight. Like the Canucks defense is. Why don't we just rip off the Band-Aid? Let's get right into it. So despite all the good signings, the Canucks made, of course, there was the Oliver Ekman-Larsson acquisition in exchange for the first-round pick and a bunch of dog shit players. As well, the team decided to extend contract offers to Tucker Pullman of the Winnipeg Jets, a right-shot defenseman, pretty big boy, worth $2,500,000 a season for 4 years. And then, if that wasn't enough, they then extended a contract to Travis Hamonic, 30-year-old Travis Hamonic, also a right-shot defenseman, for $3 million.
So
for 2 years.
$5.5 million guaranteed in cap for the next year. For the next
basically the Nate Schmidt money.
Yeah, basically, the same price you paid for Nate Schmidt. Okay, let's start. I guess that's a good pro to start with. Is now instead of one player who didn't want to be here, you've got two players who seem to want to be here for the next 2 years. In theoretically, that's okay. Good. That's
one becoming two is good.
That is a pro. Less is more. Kind of to a certain degree, right? Here's where the problem comes in. And this is what, and again, I was having lots of fun talking about the fun players before we got into this, but getting this out of the way so we can talk about the fun players again is the right thing to do here. Tucker Pullman supposedly does not stand up well, not only compared to on the advanced stats side of things, which is not great. Apparently, he also just doesn't line up on the eye test either. A lot of people in Winnipeg who were apparently just absolutely relieved to get rid of him. So I don't know why the Canucks not only felt that they needed to give him $2 million a year, or 2.5, or is it 2.5? Sorry,
2.5.
I don't know what. Not only that, plus 4 years for this guy. I don't know.
So
I really don't know like where I'm looking for, where I'm supposed to look for what good is coming out of this exactly.
So there's a lot to unpack from this contract alone, because as Canucks fans at this point, if you haven't realized this, you should now. Jim Benning and his pro scouting staff are not very good evaluators of defensive talent. It says as much that one of the best right shot defensemen they had in their system was a pickup from the NCAA, and they lost him for nothing, and he was only making $1.7 million.
Oh, I know who that is.
I think you might know.
Is it Troy Stetcher?
It might have been. So on top of that, there's the whole, like, they're just bad at figuring out actual good defensemen. But as someone who's watched Winnipeg, Tucker Pullman is just a guy. He isn't a guy you would go out of your way to give a 4-year contract to, let alone a $2.5 million contract to, because he's just a body. And typically, when you're looking for right shot defensemen, you don't sign multi-year deals to guys who are just there to skate around. Like, when you're spending 4 at 2.5, you want a guy who's actually going to be playing meaningful minutes for you. He's going to be scoring, or he's going to be like an elite shutdown guy. But Tucker Pullman is neither of those things. He skates really well for his size, but he's not an offensive defenseman, and he's not a defensive defenseman. In Winnipeg, he played pretty tough matchups, but that's because he was with Josh Morrissey, and they got killed. They got absolutely destroyed. Josh Morrissey is like massively overrated by Winnipeg and Winnipeg fans. I think actually Winnipeg fans are actually smart enough to know that Morrissey isn't as good as, say, like Neil Pionk on that team. Like they just know.
They're also kind of in a situation where it's like, well, what else do you have? Like they don't have.
Yeah, that's why
used to be incredible, and they ended up for a bunch of reasons they don't have that. Depth
but quite a few things out of their control. They ended up with nothing on their decor, but they changed that a bit. Well, then they also added Brendan Dillon via trade, and then Nate Schmidt via trade. So they've actually put together a pretty decent decor with those 4 guys alone.
Yeah.
So when a team like Winnipeg doesn't even bother to try and re-sign Pullman, who are you bidding against if you're the Vancouver Canucks that you need to extend? So the scariest thing, if you don't listen to the Vancast, folks, like listen to the latest Vancast, because
shout out to them because they just
shout out to them because it was literally their last one ever. According to Drantz, he received several messages from people in the industry, no specifications on who, that were side-eyeing the contract that was given to Pullman, and they couldn't believe it. Which, you couple that with all the analytics guys on the internet being like, yeah, Pullman's a replacement level defenseman. 4 years at $2.5 million is just ridiculous. It's doesn't feel good if you're a Canucks fan, given how the defense was the biggest area of improvement this offseason. And it seems like they've, through their own actions, made it worse.
Yes. This defense is terrible. Like, and that's no fault of Lakers who are here, like Hughes and Rathbone and Braden and Luke Shen, and also Luke Shen, who are our favorite, our absolute favorite. Here's the thing that I'm actually just like losing my mind a little bit at the Tucker Pullman contract. I was like, he must have made. I was thinking, oh, he must have made decent money on his last contract, right? Nope, his last cap hit was $775,000, and the Canucks just tripled that, like on this contract.
It's a big bet.
And then I realized, oh, this is his second contract. He had an ELC and then a standard. He must be pretty young. Nope, he's 28. He's only played 4 years, and he's 28. So they don't even get the side of erring on the side of, well, he's young, he might improve. Nope, this is what you get. He is what Tucker Pullman is.
It's
Tucker
the same
Pullman.
thing. So I was listening to the Hockey PDO cast with Dmitry Filipovich, and basically their entire consensus on the Canucks defense acquisitions this season is you're banking so heavily on hope that Oliver Ekman-Larsson's going to like find this extra gear simply because he likes being in Vancouver. And Tucker Pullman, you're expecting him to be a shutdown defenseman, even though he's 28 and has never been a good defensive defenseman his entire career. And the same guys from before, it's Tyler Myers, it's Travis Hamonic, who are older. Like, it's not better.
They're like, we think he's got a little bit of Chris Tanev in him. I mean, they share a few letters in their names, but that is it. There is nothing Chris Tanev-like about Tucker Pullman in any way, shape, or form. But somehow you've decided to pay him like he is Tucker like he's Chris Tanev to a certain degree. Like, I mean,
Chris Tanev's only making $4.5 million a year. I mean, that's the devil, you know. I mean, sure, his injury issues are like a huge red flag, but wouldn't you rather have what you know and the locker room presence he brings over just 3 bets on contracts that take you until when Niels Hoglander's ELC is up? Like, why?
I always feel bad bringing up Tanev in particular, just because I actually did think, because I say it all the time, I thought moving on from Chris Tanev was the right call at the time.
It was the right call.
Getting old, but it's now turned into the situation where they can't find anyone better. And
this is the thing.
He's doing okay, and he's doing better than expected in Calgary. So now it's like, what the hell?
He was like legitimately a top defenseman in the league last year. That's how good he was. Like, this is like the thing is like, at that time, the 2019-20 offseason, it was completely reasonable to move on from Tanev and Markstrom because their contract asks were going to put the team against it. Right. Now, with hindsight being 2020, you arguably could have re-signed Jacob Markstrom and Chris Tanev and tried to work it. A lot of people say you would have lost Demko in the expansion draft, but look at it this way. The Canucks just spent the 9th overall pick to get rid of a bunch of dead money. Are you telling me they wouldn't have found a way to pay Seattle to not take Thatcher Demko if they were willing to?
Well, I don't know. You don't negotiate with the expansion team. Like, everyone learned that. That's why they got nothing this time around, because everyone was like, yeah, we're not doing that.
I understand that. But this is what I'm saying. With the benefit of hindsight, you could have still negotiated because you still proved to the league that you were willing to part with your 9th overall pick to improve immediately. So if you're willing to give your 9th overall to protect, or not even protect, but just to get out from your mistakes, what's the difference between trading your 9th overall to protect your star goalie, Thatcher Demko? Could you imagine if you were running Thatcher Demko and Jacob Markstrom this last year? Do you think they're as bad out of the gate if they have Chris Tanev in the locker room still and Jacob Markstrom in there too?
I
I don't think they are.
Last year, I don't think it mattered. I think they were going to be that bad regardless. Like, just some of the stuff that happened to them was kind of not. It was neither like goaltending. Better goaltending wasn't going to solve what happened last year. I think
it's always going to be defense, right?
And even on defense, I don't know if just say replacing Nate Schmidt with Chris Tanev fixes much. I don't think it fixes.
Probably not.
I think it maybe it gets you from 7th place to 6th. Mm-hmm. But I think some of the stuff that happened to the Canucks last year was just so crazy and out of control that there was nothing that was going to stop that sinking ship to a certain extent, because it was stuff that we didn't even see coming. Like, you and I both had them in the play, expected them to kind of challenge for 4th at least.
Yeah, we were at least like mid, like 3rd or 4th.
Right. And that was extreme on a different level. And I also think that I'm willing to hear you out on the idea of maybe it would have been in their better interest with Tanev. Markstrom, no. And I said that as someone who obviously loves Jacob Markstrom. Like, he's one of my favorite goalies. I watched Calgary this year more than I ever have because I love watching Markstrom play.
He was not good for that.
And he was a guy hedged a lot of bets. He was okay until they burnt him out again.
Yeah, I was going to say he was great until what was it? He played like 17 straight or something.
Yeah, they completely cooked him. It's not on him that Calgary doesn't know how to manage a goaltender to save their life. That's completely
I'm pretty sure
on the organization.
Most of the discussion beforehand too was like, yeah, Calgary with Markstrom is going to be really dangerous, but will they have the foresight to not run him into the ground because that's when he fails?
I literally spent a whole all offseason harping on, hey, don't overcook him because then you're in trouble, and they did it anyway. They didn't listen to me
they
like
sure
they should have.
Did.
But also with Markstrom, if they had kept him, let's say they did re-sign him. They went in with last year with Demko and Markstrom. Yeah, again, maybe gets you from 7 to 6. I think you're looking at a situation where you're not just, if you want to keep Demko, you're not just getting rid of that 9th overall pick. You're probably parting with like Höglander or Podkolzin or something. Because remember, Seattle in theory could just hold you to your feet to the fire unless you're willing to give them everything they want, right? It's not like with making a deal with anyone else where you can make a real negotiation out of it. The expansion team, you're screwed. They're going to take whatever they want from you, whether that's that goal, whether that would have been Demko or whatever prospects they were going to make you give them to keep him. So I think at the end of the day, that was still the right call. Especially considering now, and we'll get into what the new backup goalie situation here in Vancouver in a second. But right now, you've got Pullman. You got this Pullman contract, which again, look. The one thing I'll say for this contract, as far as it goes, like, is the value probably going to go down based on what I think Pullman's going to bring to the table? Yeah, and it'll make him slightly harder to move, but it's still not immovable. It's not. This is not like it's not a total boat anchor like some of the other contracts they've got on the books.
It's a pretty big anchor. He's basically Luke. He's Luke Shen getting paid like more than freaking Yanni Hakanpää or John Merrill, who are like legit defensemen.
Sure, but I think again, like, what is he? He's a right shot. The one thing that he's got, I believe he's a right shot defenseman. People will pay for that. Even if people will take the flyer on it, you might have to retain salary on it if it goes wrong. But it's not so bad. It's not so egregious that you can't make a fix later on if it's clearly a mistake. Like,
it's true. Like at this point too, like if Duncan Keith can get traded and his whole contract gets moved, anybody can get moved. I guess
Rasmus Ristolainen can get
you a first
round pick. Then I'd say Tucker Pullman, even if he struggles later on, could net you a decent return. Like not a great one, but something.
Well, and we want to get into the actual returns. So why don't we quickly wrap up the Canucks moves, because the other really good signing they made, Brandon Sutter, finally on a contract that actually like reflects his value. I've already gone on huge tangents about how like I was ready to move on from Brandon Sutter just because it's like fuck, this team needs to improve.
Yeah,
but like whatever.
Yeah,
after seeing the Pullman and the Hamonic deals, I'm grateful they decided to just go back to Sutter instead of sign someone on the free agent market, because it sounds like they would have made a terrible call.
I guess. I mean, yeah. So here's I'm working right now on a bit of like a trade grades, like sort of, or like a signing grades sort of article right now where I give everybody kind of like a letter grade. I gave Brandon Sutter's like a C+. That seemed like the easiest out of the bunch. Cause like, yeah, totally team friendly, totally easy to manage contract. There's no move. There's no like no move clauses or no trade clauses on it. As a fourth line center, he's perfectly serviceable. The one knock I have against it is just the fact that it's the same. Like, you've already seen there's nothing Brandon Sutter brings to the table that's going to make you that much better, even as a fourth liner compared to a third liner. He is not going to improve any more than he already is. And I kind of am like, here's the thing. I think Jujhar Khaira went to the Blackhawks for less money, for like in the 6-figure range. I would rather have Jujhar Khaira on line 4 than Brandon Sutter, just because he's a younger. There's a little bit more potential for an upside there, even if it doesn't work. And again, if it doesn't, 6 figures, or it's not that hard to move or put down in the minors. And I do think that's a possibility that some of the guys who they signed out of some of these other guys that they signed could potentially steal that job later on. You never know. Especially considering Sutter didn't help much offensively this year. Like he had some, I think he had some injury issues, but also he had the hat trick.
He scored a hat trick against the Ottawa Senators. Come on.
He scored a hat trick against Matt Murray. Yes, well done. But like, okay.
So negative.
But I know, terrible of me.
What's happened? Fine. I'm supposed to be the negative one.
It's fine. Sutter, it's a fine contract. I'm not gonna lose. I kind of wish they had maybe gone and looked somewhere else first. At least, it kind of seemed like they went to Sutter like immediately rather than like waiting to see what the market had.
They did the math. They did the math on their two deals and we're like, oh, we probably should just go back to Brandon.
Yeah, Sutter is the one case where it's like, maybe the circle back situation is a better suited here than say with like some of the other players that they've done it with. Because I think there were potentially some better options for a little bit cheaper available, or at least options that could potentially have a higher payoff for around that same amount of money.
I'll give you one.
Okay.
Here, he's a player that the Canucks acquired from the Chicago Blackhawks back in 2019, I want to say, or at the
2 years ago.
I think, at the end of 2019, they picked him up from Chicago in exchange for I think he was included in a trade for like Michael Chaput or something like that, or I can't remember. It was
Tanner Caro.
Yes, so Tanner Caro has made a whopping $750,000 every year for the last 5 years.
You think
he spent all of last year on Dallas's fourth line, and he scored 10 points in 39 games.
Oh, get out! Good for him. I didn't know. That's how little I paid attention to the Stars this year. I didn't even know he played. Good for him.
The Canucks literally had him in their system instead of. There was one point where they did call him up and they for whatever reason didn't give him a look, even though that team had nothing going for it. So it was like, just give him a look. Like, who gives a shit? Yeah. Brandon Sutter, 12 points in 43 games. So kind of the same, but doesn't have the foundational rapport that Brandon Sutter has with Captain Bo Horvat, etc.
Right. With Hamonic, I also want to touch on this one was worse than the Pullman signing too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, honestly, this was a little worse because you know why it is? Because here's the thing, right? What do we know about Travis Hamonic other than the fact of like, hey, there's only about 3 teams he's going to go to, more or less. And
he kind of looks like Goofy.
Yeah, wow, that's a bit harsh, but okay, sure.
I mean, in a polite way, he just looks like a cartoon character.
That's okay.
It's the missing teeth. That's all.
It's the missing teeth. Okay.
Like, can't you just see him like going?
Oh God!
Like the Goofy.
Well, I don't think he's coming on the show anytime soon. Good Lord.
He wasn't going to come anyway.
But like but you know what was the big thing? The big pro with Travis Hamonic last year was that he was cheap. He came at about 1.25 million, and he wasn't fantastic. He was just okay. He was just an okay player. He was serviceable for the year. Like a perfect example of a good, let's take a flyer and see how it goes kind of deal, kind of contract. I have no idea what he possibly did last year to earn a raise this time around. And a raise where that more than doubles what he's going to make, what he made last year for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
There is no way he did anything warranting a full raise, like a
100% raise.
Yeah. That is insanity.
That's the Quinn Hughes effect, I guess, where they were just like, oh, he has chemistry with them. He'll still be cheaper than Chris Tanev, so we got to sign him no matter what.
I don't understand it. There's nothing nothing he did last year was so great that it was like, oh, we got to get him back and by any means necessary for any dollar amount. There was nothing he was fine. I'm not saying he was bad. He was just okay.
There was like a 10-game stretch where he was like maybe like their best defenseman, but it was like when the bar's on the floor and you're the best, like who cares?
You're just stepping over it. Like that's not a high bar to clear.
Yeah, like Jalen Chatfield was one of their best defensemen in one game. Like, doesn't mean anything.
There's no, and right now especially, I'm looking at the Canucks roster and I'm just like, I don't know where you put him. Like, there's nowhere to put him anymore. There's nowhere to put anyone anymore. I mean, I guess he plays with Hughes again, but I don't want him playing with Hughes.
I was going to say, like, I think we actually kind of tried to broach this topic when we were doing the review of the weekend, because we were like, what are the pairings on this team anymore? Because Jack Rathbone is probably going to contest for a spot, and in their like season review kind of thing, Jim Benning had said like, oh, we have enough puck moving defensemen, we just need more defensively responsible guys because everyone on their left side is.
Where are they? I'm still looking for them.
And so what do? They tripled down by getting Ekman Larsson, who's a puck moving defenseman, and trading Nate Schmidt, who was like their last really good defensively responsible puck moving defenseman. So now they have Myers, who only understands offense, Ekman Larsson, who's by all accounts taken a shit ton of steps backwards, is not a good skater anymore, and needs power play time to basically pad his stats. And then two kids who are like dynamic puck moving defensemen. And now you have
clearly needs a mentor on the blue line who can stabilize the blue line as he's learning. Yeah. And one guy who can lead a blue line on his own, but is often being asked to do too much and is being asked to kind of just carry a, like, you know, pull a boulder on a chain, basically, you know, like he's clearly getting weighed down by a partner most nights. Like, then that's kind of the problem is right now looking at their who they have it as their new options here. Like outside of Rathbone and Hughes, you obviously OEL is going to be on his own. So you got those three. You're going to want to probably OEL you're putting with, you don't want, because again, I do not under any circumstances want Myers playing with Hughes or Rathbone anymore at all.
He doesn't like playing with either guy either because he wants to be the guy.
Yeah, he wants to be the scorer. So he's not going to like, and I don't trust him to mentor, to be a good like stabilizing defenseman for Rathbone. So I have to put him with OEL. Well, then now you're stuck. Now you're in the conundrum of, okay, are you going to move Tucker Pullman up to playing first pairing with Quinn Hughes? I don't think so. You might have to get stuck with Hamonic again on there, which again was fine for last year, but I don't want him there. I don't want that pairing for 82 games a year. That's that's too much. And then there's the Luke Shen thing where it's like, well, Luke Shen could fit probably as another case of you'd be bringing a guy up to play at a pairing on a level that he shouldn't really be. Like Luke Shen, we love, but I don't want him. If he's playing 20 plus minutes a night, that's a problem.
Yeah, then they've done something wrong.
Exactly. And so maybe you can pair him with Hughes every now and then, or maybe you can pair him with Rathbone every now and then. But then you're running into the problem of, well, now we've got a more expensive defenseman literally sitting in our press box, and that becomes a whole other problem. Yeah. So this is inherently the issue here is the Canucks have somehow, by attempting to find defensemen to pair with each other, they have somehow succeeded in finding no one to pair with anybody.
They've solved none of their problems on the defense.
They've maybe gotten slightly better, like in terms of offensive ability on defense, but their actual in the zone, their own work behind their own blue line is very, very suspect.
Suspect as fuck. It's a lot of like, it's just a bunch of bets, right? Like they're banking on Tucker Pullman being like a matchup guy, or they're betting on Ekman Larsson becoming like what he was 5 years ago, which like when is betting on a guy returning to his form from 5 seasons prior ever worked out in this league? It hasn't.
When has it worked out more specifically? When has it worked out for the Canucks? Because that has not happened.
Yeah, that too.
Like I've seen some teams been able to reinvigorate a couple players, but the Canucks have tried many times and it has not worked. So I don't know what you're going to do.
It's really dicey, and I kind of love the argument that like, oh, well, this is why they hired Brad Hunt to be their defensive coach.
Brad
Shaw. But the funny thing about Brad Shaw is he was just coming off a Columbus team that was notoriously awful defensively. And you know who one of those defensemen was Seth friggin' Jones, who they traded because his friggin' numbers were just completely awful.
And because they were going to get a great return from Chicago for
that too. But you know what I mean? Like a lot of fans that are like, oh, like don't worry about the optics and the analytics because these guys have Brad Shaw backing them. And it's like Brad Shaw might be the best defensive coach in the world, but he couldn't do anything with Seth Jones. Banking on him to do something that fixes not only like Rathbone and Hughes, who are kids and are still going to learn like proper defensive zone coverage and reads and all that stuff, but you're not going to get that from 31-year-old Tyler Myers or 27-year-old Oliver Ekman-Larsson or 28-year-old Tucker Pullman or 32-year-old Luke Shen. They're pretty well set.
Yeah, you're banking on things that have not that no one else is seeing happening in your own system that somehow is going to change. Like that's just not how people work. Like people just aren't like that. There's no magical recipe that can somehow turn guys into brand new versions of things they used to be. Like it's just how it goes.
Yeah.
And it's too bad because there are pieces there that could make for a very promising blue line. They're just going to have to again pull more than their weight to make it doable. And you're going to run into a situation where Thatcher Demko and his new backup Yaroslav Halaq are going to have to really be able on a lot of nights. They're going to have to be at completely lights out, and you're flawless. Otherwise, you're not going to win a lot of games.
Yeah.
So you're asking a lot. You're asking a lot out of the younger guys. You're asking a lot out of the older guys you've just brought in. You're asking a lot of everybody in that blue
coaches,
line to do more. Yeah,
you're asking forward groups. Like you're asking so much of everyone
the sun and the
to make it work.
Instead of not enough safe bets were made on the blue line, and specifically with like guaranteed safe NHL bets. But like they made good safe bets for the depth pool. Like you mentioned, Brett Hunt.
Agreed.
You mentioned Brett Hunt. There's Luke Shen. There's Brady Keeper. We've already mentioned. You got Kyle Burrows coming in, and you got there are Devontae Stevens. These are guys who you never know. They could turn out to wow you at the end of the day. But
before we move on, I do want to say the problem is not before we move on, sorry, but before I forget this point, but it's not, we keep saying bets because that's how we view these players as in their roles. Like these are huge bets by the organization. But as we know, this organization has an idea of what a player is. And even if they do everything to prove that they are not it, they are still convinced. So to you and I, Tucker Pullman is a bet that he's going to be a shutdown defenseman. But the Canucks have decided he is a shutdown defenseman and worth 4 years at $2.5 million. In their minds, they're not making a bet because they know.
They've already they supposedly in their minds they've already seen it, even if everyone else hasn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which
that's a great.
I don't know.
That's a very good way of putting it. I think. Yeah.
Because like all of us are like, oh God, like how many times do you have to like roll the dice and hope that it works for 6 defensemen to put it all together?
Yeah.
But for them, they're like, oh no, this is fine. I don't see why everyone's freaking out. It's Tucker Pullman.
You saw. You already saw the whole thing with like with when it came to OEL, Jim Benning literally saying, "I don't know why his numbers were bad," which implies again that he's not been paying attention to the guy he just shelled out a bunt. He just shelled out a 9th overall pick to get. That's the problem.
That quote, like so. This past season,
it really gets you.
This past season, we got ran out of time. We live day to day. I work with Francesco every day going over the plan of the team. We got so many incredible quotes.
Candid,
He's a very honest man. And God bless him. Yeah. God bless him for like being so trustworthy and honest with media when he has no right to be.
When he has no
reason to be. Like he doesn't need to be as forthright. And he's not the smartest. man to be forthright with what he believes. And that goddamn quote where he can explain why a $7 million defenseman he just traded the 9th overall pick for, why he was bad. And he, look, I cannot wrap my fucking head around it. It is such a frustrating quote to listen to.
He's very truthful at the wrong times, and he's also very bit of a fibber at the wrong times as well.
He's bad at it. He's so bad at lying. He's so bad.
He's a very interesting man.
He is. I would love a book written by him somehow, where he just explains his entire MO. I don't know.
Maybe someday. One player I did want to talk about in terms of signing as well, who I already kind of mentioned, Yaro Halaq. We talked about him in the last show a little bit before we knew if it was for sure that he was coming.
Right.
So we're looking at a situation here. It's a 1.5 million cap hit, very manageable. He struggled a little bit last year, had a bit of a tougher year in Boston last year than in previous years, but overall a very serviceable backup for Tuukka Rask over the last so many years. I like this. I don't mind this at all. Like I know some people are that this contract concerned them a little bit. Like this was one of they would group into the Hamonic Pullman category. 1.5 for 1 year on a goalie. Who cares? Like that's easy. This is a very safe bet. Like this
when we were speculating on our last show, we were literally like, if it's anything over 1.5 million, then what was the point of buying out Holtby? And what did they do? They bought out Holtby, signed him to 1.5, and it's pretty much like all bonuses. So it's like, who cares? You can't find an issue with it because it's also only a year long.
If he hits all those bonuses,
if he hits them, awesome. Good for him.
And that means he did really well. So who cares?
And it shows that the Canucks are also thinking long term with the idea that, hey, maybe Michael DiPietro actually competes for some games this season.
Yes.
And then next year we're open enough that we can get him in if he's actually ready. And we're not tied down like in an Anders Nielsen situation with Thatcher Demko when they were like, oh shit, this guy's actually going to be pissed off if we can't get him NHL games. We have to trade Nielsen while we still can. And then that led to the goalie disaster of 2018, 2019. Yeah. But
you know what's wild is Yaro Halaq has been in the league long enough that he was drafted in the 9th round in 2003, which by the Canadians
36.
Is wild. We do not have 9 rounds anymore.
Well,
very wild. I'm very excited to see him. I think he's going to do very well he's going to do pretty well under Ian Clark. He doesn't have to be amazing. He just has to be serviceable enough to come in and play, about 30 games a year, hopefully, if they're managing their goalies wisely here. And last year he played 19 out of 56. That's about in that ballpark. That's 40% of your games. That's close to 40% of your games. That's about where you want your backup to be. Maybe even sometimes closer to 45. Like you bring in just a little bit up higher. That's what you want. They got 31 out of him the year before. He had a 919 against in Boston in 2019-20.
Halak's always been like really, really good as a backup. Like
he isn't dipped below 9. Believe a 905 was last year was his worst year since 2013. That's very good.
That's some consistency.
Yeah, he's a very consistently good goaltender, especially when it comes to not like you don't want him playing necessarily starting minutes. He's done it before many times, and he's done okay. But he's not such a sure bet for that many games that you want him playing that much. He is this is a perfect situation where theoretically, if you're the Canucks, I believe he does have a no move clause unless I'm mistaken. Which again, 1 year, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine for a 1 year deal. I don't know if it's a full no move or if it's but at the very least, there's a possibility that say, DiPietro comes in, maybe you can move him later for a return at the trade deadline, and get a return there for someone else who wants him, and give DiPietro the number 2 if that's how you want to go about it. This is a very good bet for them to make on Halaq. And as somebody again who gets like, I just get excited to see guys who I've known in the league as goaltenders come in and play in the Vancouver uniform. I'm cool. I'm excited to see Yaro Halaq after come in and get his opportunity after that. Back in 2010 when he had that wild run where he just got the Slovakians, I believe, to the bronze medal game. And then had the game that first round against the Capitals where he single-handedly just took them out in like the final 3 of that series, like the President's Trophy winning Capitals in 2009, I think it was. He was incredible that year. I would love to see that. I would love to see. I'm very excited to see him in a Vancouver uniform.
Well, before we get into the NHL's grand free agency day, because we have some winners and some losers. We won't go over all 32 teams because that would just take for fucking ever. We'll go over some of the winners, some of the losers, whatever. But do we have, by chance, contract updates on Pettersson, Hughes, or Dickinson? Can you report on that?
No, I can't. I mean, I can't report on that. I don't. My sources have been very quiet.
Yeah, what are your French sources saying?
So the thing with here's the interesting thing. With like Pettersson Hughes, obviously this is the biggest concern right now is that when the money, one of the things that while all of the contracts assigned were very good for the Canucks in terms of stocking the cupboard with decent, cheap, low frill players to kind of fill out the depth pool. They are now in a situation where they've only got $14 million in cap space. That is with not just with if it were just Pettersson and Hughes that they had left to sign, it's still hairy, but it's not. It's doable. Yeah. But you still have Olli Juolevi, who's not signed. He's probably going to come at a cheap price tag anyway. Whatever. Yeah. Jason Dickinson is the one that's kind of throwing a wrench in here because he's probably worth a decent more amount. He's worth an amount that's probably going to take you closer to what, 11 million dollars in cap space, maybe even 10. They're in a very precarious spot here. The one thing I wanted to bring up about it in terms of how we're looking at how some other people are looking at it, Evolving Hockey, who, by the way, shout out to them. They just I believe announced that they quit their day jobs and they're just full time, which is good for them. It's always exciting to see people who put as much time into those passion projects get the opportunity to make them their career. I always get excited about that. I'm always happy for people when that happens. Then they've been a huge resource, I think, for this show, for both you and I in our writing. They're great. They're great. They're great. They're great twins. They have their contract projections that they put up every year. What I do find interesting and worth noting here is that for Quinn Hughes, they have him right now pegged at predicting at like a 6-year deal worth about $7 million per. That's based on what we've seen in the defensive signings range lately. I don't think you're going to get that. I think that is I think they're being a little bit generous on the Canucks side that is what Hughes will take. Because I think I believe Cale Makar, if I'm not mistaken, just signed for an 8x8 or something along those lines.
His was not.
It might have been close to that. It was
a lot. That's all I know.
Miro Heiskanen obviously signed for a lot of money. If you're Vancouver, I think right now, and they also have Pettersson's contract. Before I actually mention this, Pettersson, they have is very interesting. They have him at only getting 2 years with at just a shade under $5 million, which I think that's a little bit generous again to the management side, just based on what Pettersson brings.
Yeah.
But that might but I do think the term is kind of closer to what you're looking at here. You might end up being in a situation where it might be more in your best interest, especially because I think one of the things we've seen from the UFA market these last few days has been if you need to get your defenseman locked up, if you have an elite defenseman, lock them up to as much money as you can for as much term as possible as soon as you can. I think the Canucks might be in their best interest right now to focus a little bit more time quick on Hughes getting him on that 8-year deal right now, that max amount of year of term for as much money as you can get, because that is going to be the harder negotiation to redo down the line versus a forward. You're going to have a much harder time getting Quinn Hughes to sign to a relatively team-friendly contract again the second time around. You're going to be paying out the wazoo for that extra extended amount of time.
He strikes me as a flight risk too. Like if either of him or Pettersson were going to walk when they're, in that UFA range, like it wouldn't be shocking to me if it was him.
Interesting. Okay. I think a lot of people agree with you. I think a lot of people would agree with you on that. And I think that's largely due to the fact that New Jersey has now both of his brothers. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, he's going to want to go to New Jersey. Let's not kid ourselves here. Who would you rather live in, New Jersey or Vancouver? Come on. Let's call a spade here. Vancouver is the better place to be.
I believe New Jersey's marketing, their marketing for the city is just, we're that close to New York, or you can see New York from the harbor.
I've watched the Futurama bits where they're like, oh, who would have thought that Robot Hell would be here in New Jersey? Well, actually, no, but yeah, I'm obviously being a little facetious here, but yeah, with Hughes, I think he's more of a flight risk in the idea that if you don't sign him, give him his due early enough, and if you don't give him his due on this contract, he's going to go to the highest bidder the next time around. Whereas, say, if you give that 8x8 now, you give him the all right, we believe that you're the number one guy. You're the rock of the franchise going forward in the blue line. As your team gets better, he'll have more time to see the team improve around him. In theory. And he might be more willing to come back. He might be willing to sign that second contract around after if you've improved enough. If you've improved in that 8-year time. So I think it'd be better off served going the full 9 yards here now with Hughes, and then trying to give Pettersson as much money as you possibly can on a short-term contract and renegotiating again once some of that cap space opens up again. Obviously, the one worry as always with Pettersson is that, well, every time they have cap space, they immediately use it to sign a Tucker Pullman. So you have to hope they don't do that again the next time around. But it will be a little easier because you'll only have to be worrying about the one guy rather than the two you're worrying about right now, the two generational guys that you're worrying about right now. So I think that's kind of where they should be looking at right now. Focus your attention on Hughes, get that contract done for as much as you can, and then try and see what you can get done with Pettersson afterwards. Because again, if an offer sheet comes through, and he, again, assuming that he wants to sign it, you might be in a bit of a problem, in a crunch, but you'll just do it. You'll get that done anyway. So focus on that right now. Get Hughes done first.
On that note, why don't we talk about some of the NHL free agency winners and losers? There were quite a lot more losers than winners, as you would expect when $800 million exchanges hands from ownership pockets into the hands of players, which we love to see. Love to see players getting their worth. But that also leads to some very funny situations in which some players maybe get paid a bit too much. Some players take some serious pay cuts.
Overpaid on free agency? Shocking.
It's a wild one. So I'll start us off with a wiki wild free agency weekend. The Arizona Coyotes. Say what you want about tanking and all that, but when you come away from an expansion draft, and then the entry draft and free agency, and you've got $16 million in cap space, and you've only got 4 forwards and 2 defensemen signed next year, and you've got 5 second-round picks and 2 first-round picks in a loaded draft class, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, that's not bad.
It sucks for the actual Arizona Coyotes fans that have, unfortunately had to put up with just mediocrity, below mediocrity for the last 10, 11 years. the last time they were in the playoffs, Mike Smith was carrying them on the defense. Like it's been a long time since Arizona's been relevant. Like it's just insane. They're
One could argue they've never been relevant, but
this is true. It sucks because like I don't like their ownership group after that article from Katie Strang where they like threatened to sue her just for doing her fucking job. I hate.
was gonna say, or the management team,
yeah, like I hate complimenting them, but like it's hard to just be like, oh well, what they did wasn't good because it really was good. I just hate that I'm extending a compliment to people that are just shitty. So I won't speak anymore. So Lachlan, your pick for a good or bad of the weekend.
What's interesting about the Coyotes, before I make any other choices, is I kind of had like, if we were doing like a Venn diagram of like the winners and losers of of free agency, I would literally have the Coyotes in that smack dab in the middle. Like I'd have them right there. They would be the middle of that Venn diagram. They're
like a bit of both because their team's gonna suck so bad.
Right. And like this is the most important part here for me anyway. It's like, they've done a great job at actually acknowledging, hey, we're not that good. We're not good enough to really be even on the cusp. Let's just sell everything, recoup as much assets as we can and start sort of fresh, not as necessarily fresh enough because like they still have Clayton Keller. They still have Jacob Chikrin. They still have very decent pieces here, but they've also sold off a lot. My biggest issue with them is the fact that if there's any team that kind of needs to win now, it's the Coyotes. And because in terms of hey, you know what? This team has struggled at the box office for a long time. I feel like you're kind of on the clock here to start winning some things before you end up having to move to Houston or something, because people have gotten tired of supporting a team that literally keeps rebuilding and restarting over again every like 4 years. Like you can't have a sustainable fan base that way. You're not going to win. You're not going to win over the hearts of people if literally every time you even get close to kind of being decent, you're like, okay, fire sale, start again. Like you can't do that. You can't have that.
I completely understand that.
It's not like Ottawa or Edmonton where they have like the benefit of being in a market that's so hockey crazy that they'll get as much time as they want to get it right, more or less.
Sure. I will just say though, even if they invest all this money in a rebuild and it fails, then that means their shithead ownership group wasted all their money for the last few years, and that rocks. So if they can't win now and they try and rebuild and they still can't win, don't care, because it means a shitty person wasted millions of dollars. So it's a win-win for us. So then your choice can be, winner or loser, doesn't matter, just a team that stood out for you.
A team that stood out for me, I think I gotta give props to Florida. I think they did okay. Like they didn't do a lot. I think they're in a situation where I think they're very much in a stay the course kind of mode. They don't need to do much. They just kind of need to manage what they've got and let it keep growing and kind of keep that again, like last year, they won out really well with Carter Verhaeghe, who now I think got his big payday this time around. But overall, they have a group that's more or less just, they're waiting to see what can happen as they get and not taking too many crazy bets on anybody. And they've since added, I believe, Sam Reinhart from the Sabres, which is a bit of an interesting one. We'll see how that goes. They now have all three of the top three picks from that year: Ekblad, Reinhart, and Bennett. They got all three. They got what they wanted at the end of the day. But they're a team that won the division. Or did they win? No, they were second in their division last year. I always forget if Carolina won. They're a team that is so close. They lost Chris Driedger. That sucks, but they have Spencer Knight coming. They're in a position where I think they're going to be just as good as they were last year, if not a little bit better, just from people getting a step up. Like Sam Bennett was weirdly good. Like when he got to Florida, he was very good.
He parlayed 10 really good games into a $4 million a year extension.
Bit of a risk on that one.
Bit of a gamble, but yeah.
Florida's got cap space to burn, so might as well.
Yeah, fair.
Like they could be. I think they're going to take another step forward this year. I think what you saw from them last year was just the start. I think, again, provided that they manage their goaltending well and give Spencer Knight the lion's share of the work compared to Sergei Bobrovsky, and at the very least give Bobrovsky opportunities to try and return to the form he once was at. I think you could see this team take that step forward and finally get past that first round, exercise that first round demon. I think they're a pretty good winner here.
Okay, I'm gonna pick a loser.
Yes,
because it's fun to be negative.
They're the losers are the more fun ones to talk about in this scenario, aren't they?
I hate to do this to you because of your fandom or former fandom. It might have changed.
No,
that might be out the window.
I know what you're coming up to. They're gone.
The Carolina Hurricanes. After walking away from Alex Nedeljkovic, who was a Calder nominated or Calder contender, I should say, goaltender, they then also lost Petr Mrazek to the Toronto Maple Leafs in free agency and downgraded, in my opinion, to Freddie Anderson and Antti Ranta. We talked so much about the betting that the Canucks are doing, but it's not betting. They believe that these guys are the next tandem of the future. Seemed weird to walk away from a guy who might be like a goalie of the future in Nedeljkovic, but I guess they didn't think it was set for long-term success. It might have been a fluke. But on top of that, they signed Tony DeAngelo to a 1-year, $1 million contract. And that followed trading Warren Fogle for Ethan Bear. We'll get into the other losers of the free agency, Dave.
Yeah, who else?
Edmonton Oilers, but yeah, just all in all, I don't know what the fuck Carolina is doing with this offseason.
No idea.
I can't tell if they're trying to tank. I can't tell if they legitimately think.
They're not trying to tank. I know that much.
It just seems like they're trying to cheap out or something.
Supposedly they're in win now mode, which I see kind of where that idea comes from them, but also no, I don't. Okay. I will say with Petr Mrazek, you mentioned Petr Mrazek, that one, he's a bit of an injury risk. I think from a hockey standpoint, that was kind of the right decision for them to move on from Mrazek. I don't know why they then went to Freddie Anderson, because I think Anderson, like apples to apples here. I think Anderson is in theory the better goalie than Mrazek on a game-to-game basis. It's a little bit more of the down the stretch. Is he as good? That might be up for debate. Antti Ranta is another case of a goaltender who is very good when he's healthy, like Mrazek, but also very injury prone. So I think you run a risk there. And again, the fact that they gave up Nedeljkovic and that's the rub for me, is that I think going with Anderson and Ranta instead of keeping Nedeljkovic and signing one of those two was a clear error. It was a clear mistake.
Agreed.
But at the end of the day, none of that stuff really matters because the Tony DeAngelo thing.
Yeah. They signed Tony D, so it's like, who cares? If they suck, good. If they
I'm not going to say much about it because I think we all know that that was a clearly stupid thing for them to do.
There was a lot of great written pieces in The Athletic by Sarah Sivian, I think Katie Strang even wrote something too.
Rachel Dory wrote a great article.
Yeah, Rachel Dory had a great piece.
Plus a couple other things that happened that we talked about on the last show.
Basically just talking about how much goodwill the Canes had built up over the last few seasons just to try and make it seem like a team that was for everybody. And then just throwing it away on a $1 million player.
Throwing it away just for maybe a win or two more, if even that, he's not that good to begin with, really.
Yeah.
I
don't like it.
Well, I am very sad, and I don't know how often you'll see me wearing those Hurricane shirts anytime soon. I will say the bunch of jerks is actually appropriate now.
It is very appropriate now.
Yeah, it's no longer ironic. It's just real. Like, oh well, tough milkshake duck moment for the Hurricanes. Oh well, they're dead to me now. Goodbye. Sorry, Sarah Sivian.
Your choice, winner or a loser?
Loser. Let's go with Edmonton. Let's just start with Edmonton.
Yeah,
Like Zach Hyman, like is a very, as we mentioned on the when we were talking about the idea that the Canucks were interested in Zach Hyman for a bit.
Yeah.
Serviceable guy, very good. He is objectively a good hockey player and a top and like a maybe. Well, I don't. Maybe at the very least can play with top players. Like
he's a guy that can move up
complementary
and down the lineup and be effective pretty much everywhere when he's
a bit of a
healthy.
JT Miller. He's a bit of a JT Miller. Like he's
not
he's
nearly as good, but
he's pretty good. He's pretty good. Like, he's
but not JT Miller. That's what I'm saying.
Maybe not JT Miller. Yeah, maybe. But at the very least, but like can play with different players and can complement good pieces, which you do need. But they're about to pay. But they're paying him in term and cap hit like he's a star, which is because Edmonton can't get out of their own way.
And speaking of like old, like he is not young, so they're going to be paying.
He's like 27, 28.
I think he's 28.
Okay.
And so they're paying him $5.5 million for 7 years.
It's too rich. It's too rich for my blood, and I think it's too rich for most people's blood. It's not a good call. It's a huge. That's gonna backfire very quickly. And then you throw in the fact that they also signed Cody Ceci, who's not good. Yeah, they did not
2 years or term and dollar amount, 4 years at 3.25.
They gave up Ethan Bear, who was good.
Then they re-upped Tyson Berry, 3 years at 4.5.
Tyson Berry, good power play guy. Still not great.
He'll always be a top producer so long it doesn't matter if it's Tyson Berry. You throw any defenseman on that first power play unit with friggin' McDavid and Draisaitl, you're going to lead the league in points. It doesn't matter that it's Berry.
Berry would be fine if they didn't also
put Brad Hunt on there
and Cody Ceci and all the other guys, and then give him to right. Like that's more the problem is the fact that Tyson Berry is one of many guys who is not great in his own end, who is better in his own in the other end of the ice than the other guys, but still. It's the compounding of the issues, really. And then the fact that they have decided once again to go with Mike Smith again.
For 2 years.
Goal. Again, he's 30. Guys, I cannot stress enough. He's 39 years old, and they just gave him a 2-year contract that'll see him until he's 41. Are you out of your mind? Like, in what universe? Like, I get that he was fine. Like, I get that he wasn't the problem, the reason they got swept by Winnipeg at all. Like, clearly he did his best. He quite literally was the only, I think, one of the few players that actually showed up. Like, he was fine. But he's still a 39-year-old goaltender. Why? There are plenty of good goalies available for you to go out and get. Why didn't you try to get any of them? Why?
It's a good question, right? Like there was tons of goalies available at the expansion draft, at the deadline, like
draft. All of them. They
really baffling, really, and
they traded out of their spot so another team could draft, so the Wild could pick a goalie. And
one of the top goalies that fell in the draft. Like he was the first ranked goalie that somehow wasn't taken by Buffalo or whoever it was that took him with 15th overall, or Detroit or whoever. So it was like
someone else could have used him. Like but they just didn't take him. I don't know. There is nothing about this. There is nothing that the Oilers spent this draft trying to go all in and somehow making themselves worse. Like they very clearly have made themselves worse. They do have Warren Fogle, who could be okay. They still have to sign Kailer Yamamoto, but nope, that's not going to move the needle in terms of that's not going to change the first round exit. That's going to, if anything, make it harder for you
if they get there
into the playoffs. Now they're not there. They're not there. Maybe Zach Hyman helps a little bit, contributing in the early going, but that contract's going to age like milk. It's not going to go well.
Low key winner for me, New Jersey. They've still got a lot to do because they're still kind of in this awkward, like we're rebuilding. We are still like kind of pseudo in a tank mode, but Dougie Hamilton, that's a good pickup. Jonathan Bernier, 2 years. It's a low amount. That's a decent enough pickup. Their goaltending has been like a complete mess pretty much since Broder left.
And a lot of that's due to the fact that Corey Schneider got had a lot of injury issues.
Also, when they picked up Schneider, they still had Broder and were relying on him to play 70 games a season. So it was like they had Schneider in his prime and didn't play him. So it was like a huge waste of like Schneider's prime. They got nothing out of either.
They do have Mackenzie Blackwood now, who's supposed to who's very good, who's a very good goalie.
But yeah, when you're finishing the expansion draft, the entry draft, and the free agency day, and you have 22 mil in cap space, and they're not really cap committed that heavily to any forwards. Like, they got rid of pretty much every single one of them. Like, they're pretty well set up to rebuild from scratch. So like they're on the way up. So like, just for like not doing anything too brash, I commend them for coming away with this with like a really good defenseman, a decent enough backup to Blackwood as he comes along, and fuckloads of cap space in a year when you probably want to weaponize that for draft picks, because the 2022 draft is loaded. So if you're somehow flipping cap space for picks midway through the next season, you're in a good spot. Lachlan.
That was kind of the interesting thing for me, is I was kind of like, why did they? I'm not gonna say this is a loser necessarily, but I was kind of like, Dougie Hamilton. Why would Dougie Hamilton sign long term in New Jersey? Like, that kind of felt like that was odd to me. Like, I feel like he could have gone other places. He could have gotten that same deal from other places that might have had more upside. That was kind of an odd. I feel like his free agency choice is a little odd in my opinion.
Was a bit odd. I wonder if they tried to sell him on like, hey, we're gonna have, Jack Hughes, we're gonna have Luke Hughes, we're gonna have Alexander Holtz. Like, we have a bunch of really dynamic young people coming into the system pretty soon, and we want you to be kind of the leader that, carries us along the way. We've got really good culture here with like, PK Subban, Damon Severson on the right side. Like, their right side is pretty good, even though like Subban's like completely washed. But there's enough young pieces there where like I could see them trying to sell like the captaincy type angle to him. Like, you'll be the most relied upon leader here, and you're probably going to be shepherding Luke Hughes along. So maybe that's what sold it for him.
Just kind of an interesting one. I guess if I were going to pick a winner, another winner here,
sure.
There's some interesting options. Or did we go? Or we went. Or sorry, it's kind of there's a couple interesting options in here. I think. I don't know.
I would say when you look at like the breadth of work done by all the teams, I would still, like, in spite of the Pullman and the Hamonic deals, I would still technically call the Canucks a winner at this free agency, just for the scope of work accomplished. Like, they completely goofed.
They did what they do every year, where they make a very critical bad error.
Yes.
In a couple countries, but this time around, the good outweighs the bad. Like, there's a lot to like about what the Canucks did this year. Like, Bill DiGiuseppe is a nice pickup in terms of like what he can do at both at the AHL level and the NHL level. I like that pickup as well. Like, there's a lot of good they did this year.
Aside from that, though, like, there really wasn't too many winners, I don't think. Like, after New Jersey, like, there's...
I feel like I'm missing one for sure. Like, I feel like there is like a couple other
Tampa Bay. I mean, trading Brent Seabrook's contract, or trading Tyler Johnson in a second for Brent Seabrook's contract so that they'll still be cap compliant, is just like, you got to tip the cap to Julien Brisebois for managing to pull that off.
What about the Kings as a winner? And I guess we could kind of use that at the very least to segue into the fact that, hey, Alex Edler is now an LA King.
Yeah, we'll close with the Edler thing. So the Kings, I think, had a pretty decent. It was quiet. They did pick up Phil Deneau to a pretty big contract.
A little bit, probably a little bit.
Is a lot for a guy whose thing is, I don't score, but I prevent scoring really well. So. I mean, you want him on your team as a defensive center, but like, it's a pretty big contract. But on top of that, there's the Victor Arvidsson pickup. There's the fact that their prospect pool has like 77 players on it.
You know what they did? They didn't go nuts, and that was kind of what they needed to do. They didn't need to, and they didn't feel inclined to do something drastic. They didn't try and immediately ramp up, knowing that the Pacific's going to be probably not very good this year. and they'll honestly probably get rewarded for it anyway, because they're very easily, as a younger group, a decent team. Like they're not like they could very easily. I could easily see them challenging for like the third spot or like the fourth. Right.
It could be like an Ottawa Senators season last year in the North Division, where like as the season was winding down, all their young prospects were just like turning it on and like playing really fucking well. Like it could be that kind of situation where they have no right to win games.
I think
they did, but they still struggled. Yeah.
They struggled, like growing pains for sure, but they weren't. But like I think they won a lot more games down the stretch than they were expected to as well.
And they started really good too, I believe.
They started very well.
Yeah.
I could very much see a situation where they end up with a playoff spot just by not rushing themselves and not trying to go all in on it. Just being like, yeah, they are the team that should be going. Let's see if we can make the playoffs and see how things go from there, kind of thing. They're kind of in that spot.
We've joked about this multiple times on this podcast, but what would you do if the Kings won a cup after rebuilding for 3 years before the Canucks even got to playoffs consistently?
Well, I'd probably cry for
just stop watching hockey.
And no, I need it too much. I'm too addicted at this point. I'm too involved.
You'd pick 2 brand new teams to be your teams and just pretend you'd never watched the Canucks.
I'd be like, I hate the Canucks, but then I'd be watching them the entire
I was
time.
always a Seattle fan.
What are you talking
so,
about? Yeah,
so speaking of Seattle, I don't know what the fuck they're doing, dude. Their expansion draft, we questioned that in our expansion draft summary episode. Weren't really too sure what they were doing with the direction. They had a ton of cap space, and we figured there's got to be a bigger plan afoot. Instead, on free agency day, they signed Philip Grubauer to a 6-year, $5.9 million contract. Jaden Schwartz to a 5-year, $5.5 million contract. Alex Wenberg to a 3-year, $4.5 million contract. And then they traded Vitek Vanacek back to Washington for a second-round pick. I have no clue what the fuck their whole expansion draft plan was. Missing from my notes, but they picked Gavin Bayliner, the boat from Columbus Blue Jackets, and then they let him re-sign in Columbus. So a part of me is like,
I didn't even notice that. Wait, as an RFA? Like, is an RFA or
he was I think he was like one of those G6 UFAs. But yeah, they picked him up and then let him go. And so it's like,
what?
Where was the strategy? Yeah, you got to check it out. It's so embarrassing. But it's like, what were you doing
then? Why did you pick him?
Like Alex Wenberg wasn't he just bought out by the Florida Panthers too? He was bought out.
Wenberg got too much money from the last Panther regime. It's not so Wenberg is actually okay, but he got.
But they signed him to a contract that is like $1 million cheaper. That's it. So why wouldn't you have just traded for him?
Well, now you don't have to.
Or been like, hey, we'll take Wenberg off your hands so you don't buy him out, but we also want someone else.
I don't know. Interesting.
But it's like they came away. They came away from the expansion draft with like $23 or $30 million, $29 million in cap space, and instead of using that to really hammer in the team they were trying to build, they just signed a bunch of dog shit contracts. So it's like
they didn't weaponize their cap space.
They didn't weaponize it,
and space they wanted very well.
They're just another team.
Yeah, they're not that good.
No,
I don't know why they. At least we know why they picked up Curtis McDermott now, because they did move him, I believe, to Colorado. It's something. It's more than I thought you would get for Curtis McDermott.
Sure,
and here's the thing: Grubauer is the one contract that I'm like, I see why. Like, I don't hate it. It's kind of it's weird.
It's the Markstrom contract because he's 29.
He's 20, but he's a good goalie.
Sure,
Grubauer's a good goalie. He doesn't get necessarily always his due.
But you signed Chris Driedger, so you're spending $9 million in gold.
That's where it gets weird.
So why
did they sign him? Why did they not pick up? Why did they pick up Vitek Vanacek just to flip him? Why back to the team that he was already on? Why it's just a bit. It's all odd.
It's all just a big why.
But
why? What were you doing? What were you
there's no semblance of of roster construction here. This is hodgepodge. This is
how many
throwing it at the wall and seeing what sticks. Let's go.
I had so many tweets being like, the Seattle Kraken invested hundreds of $1,000s into a analytics staff just to assemble this. And I thought, like, okay, I'm going to eat so much crow when they, like, pick up Tyler Johnson, Yanni Gordon, Andre Palat, so that they don't take Eric Cernak or something. But nope, they got nothing. I do not know what
the Gavin Bayreuther thing is. Very funny.
The Gavin Bayreuther thing is just like really funny.
That's how that they just let him immediately walk back. Like the Blue Jackets had pieces that you could have taken that might have been okay. Why?
Well, that's the thing. Like watching some of the trades that are happening now too. It's like Tyler Johnson gets flipped alongside a second for Seabrook, and it's like, what? Why weren't you like in on that? Like Tyler Johnson's like overpaid, but do you really think he's not worth $5.5 million? But Jaden Schwartz is?
Yeah.
Like, why would you commit to longer dollars being spent over 5 years with Jaden Schwartz when you could have taken a pick to take Tyler Johnson off of their hands for less years?
Yep.
I don't know. It's insane.
It's a bit baffling.
They're probably like my biggest loser from the free agency day.
Wow.
Because of their signings and because it underscores just the opportunity lost by their management group on like what they could have picked up in the ensuing days. Like Tampa Bay traded Mitchell Stevens for a 6th round pick. And Mitchell Stevens is probably like a 3rd line forward on like a bad team. So you could probably get him for like nothing if you're Seattle. Yeah. But no, nothing.
I will say
Craziness.
the Grubauer contract does segue into one of my other losers of this year, which is Colorado. Like,
yes,
okay, they gave Gabriel Landeskog the $7 million, which was good. Like, sure, like a bit pricey, but still, whatever. He's part of your core that won a President's Trophy last year. Yeah. I get that. But then the fact that they just let Grubauer go at all is weird to me. Not because again, Grubauer is necessarily the best goalie in the world or anything, but they don't really have anyone else good, like any other options coming. Like it's not like with the Canucks when they let Markstrom go, they knew Thatcher Demko was coming, and then Mike DiPietro. The Avalanche have Pavel Francouz, who's good by all accounts, but like not necessarily a world beater from what I've seen out of him. But after that, that's it. They don't have anything. They have Trent Miner coming maybe down the line, but that's years down the road. Yeah. That's not anytime.
You're not banking on him to win you playoff games in the next 2 years.
No. They added Darcy Kemper for cheap. I like Darcy Kemper, and I've maintained for a long time that he is extremely underrated for what his value was to the Coyotes for those
when he's healthy.
Yes, exactly. When he's healthy. Darcy Kemper has injury issues.
Yeah,
I think they're running and so does Pavel Francouz for that matter. Let's not forget the bubble year where they ended up losing in Game 7 to Dallas because they had to run Michael Hutchison for the last 2 of those games because they literally ran out of goalies. Like
classic.
They have not stabilized their goaltending, and I think the biggest problem is that if they really want to stabilize it, if it was either re-sign Grubauer or make a probably losing trade to get stable goaltending that ends up hurting your team's potential more than it helps it just because of what you're losing out of it. I would have just bit the bullet and given Grubauer the money he wanted because frankly, you weren't going to find a better option. And now I feel like they're drastically hurt their chances of potentially going farther in the playoffs. Like I don't see this team as a contender as much anymore, just because I feel like their goaltending is very shaky. Just not based on their skill, based on their ability to stay healthy. Yeah,
agreed. It was a strange free agency for like good teams and like a bad free agency for bad teams. Like just all in all, like the winners won because of little things. They didn't win because of big moves. I mean, no one ever really does win because of the big moves, but c'est la vie. But before we close out with this episode of the CreaseCast, we do need to talk about.
Can I put two more before we go? Can I put in two more losers into the bracket as well, very quickly?
No.
Oh, damn it.
No.
Okay. Two. I got two.
Okay.
The Rangers as well.
Oh yeah.
They went okay. Tom Wilson on the ice is terrible in every way, shape, or form, but I will give him credit. The Rangers have literally imploded entirely because of him. And
I admire the Rangers I admire the Rangers for committing to the bit. Like, you thought it was over when they went for Goudreau and something else, and then it was
Goudreau,
we're also going to get Ryan Reeves. It's like, oh my God.
What? I have no clue what they're doing. This is Chris Drury is over it. I'm pretty sure is in over his head. Like, this is wild.
Especially when you couple it with a lot of people that were their draft in general wasn't that great either. You're like, ew.
Yeah, they have not helped themselves here. And then the other one, this might be a little controversial just because of because they actually did okay on some of their returns this year. Actually, they've actually done decently. But I'm going to throw Buffalo in there specifically because right as we're in the middle of while we've been recording, there was a statement came out from his agents. This is quote. The process is not working. As previously stated, we fully anticipated a trade by the start of the NHL free agency period. After the agreed upon and prescribed period for conservative rehabilitation lapsed in early June 2021, it was determined by the Sabres medical staff that a surgical procedure was required. The recommendation by Jack's independent neurosurgeon, other spine specialists consulted, and the surgery Jack feels most comfortable having in order to correct a herniated disc in his neck is to proceed with artificial disc replacement surgery. A further point of concern is that our camp was initially under the impression that the Sabres specialist was in agreement with the artificial disc replacement surgery until that was no longer the case. What is being left out of the discussion is that Jack would be able to play in the NHL for the start of the season pending medical clearance if he were allowed to have the surgery he desires even as of this date. Repeated requests have been made to the Sabres since early June to no avail. This process is stopping Jack from playing in the NHL, and it is not working.
Jesus Christ!
So the Sabres are doing a terrible job at managing the Eichel thing. They did okay.
That'll help his trade value.
Yeah, yes, it
what
will.
The fuck?
The Sabres. I mean, the Sabres botched this entirely on their own. They've done again.
Yeah.
I feel somewhat bad because they've actually done okay. In terms of again, getting a first rounder for Rasmus Ristolainen is incredible. Good for them. They've actually won a few trades and a few deals of late that have made them a little better, that have definitely made them better. They need to still move Jack Eichel. It is clearly over, and they haven't done that yet. And now the agents are literally coming out saying, hey, we have had the Sabres are not communicating with us in any way, shape, or form. And now Jack Eichel might miss the start of the season regardless of who he's playing for because the Sabres have done such a crap job of managing their second overall pick guy who was the face of the franchise up until this season. Like, good Lord. I've actually seen some of the things where they interviews where people ask Kevin Adams about Jack Eichel, and he literally makes it super clear that he has not checked in once in the last month, since the season ended. He has not even asked. And that's not me presuming. That's him literally going, basically saying it in every way possible that, nope, I haven't checked up. I don't care. I haven't checked on what he's doing. It's wild. It is wild that they're handling what should be a huge trade for them. Such a major trade for them this badly. Holy cow.
Well, I mean, they were obviously waiting for the right deal, but it really doesn't help when you're the agents of the player you're trying to sign are just plummeting his trade value for them.
Somebody just put it, the Sabres were holding Eichel's medical records hostage until a team presented an offer significant enough that Buffalo felt they were serious about the trade. Friedman, meaning Elliot Friedman, has said this multiple times in his podcast. Eichel's team just blew that leverage out of the water.
No shit.
It is gone. There it goes.
Okay.
Whoopsie. Well, I mean, hey, if it gets him moved, frankly, they should, because it'll get them move faster at this point. Like,
yeah,
what are you gonna do?
we
What are you
want
gonna do?
we're Team Chaos, and that's what we want. So I get it.
What are you gonna? So I look forward to seeing him in a Vegas Golden Knights uniform next year.
I agree.
Yeah.
Last one, obviously, got to pour one out for a leaving legend, Alex Edler. He signed in LA, of all places, on a 1-year, $3.5 million contract. He basically pulled Nate Schmidt and was like, yeah, I'm good. I'm done playing in Vancouver. So did Holtby. He was like, yeah, buy me out. I don't want to wait till the second buyout window. Get me the fuck out. He literally took like a third string goalie position in Dallas to get the fuck out. Brogan Rafferty's agent was like, I'm not even bothering to talk to the Canucks. Just get me this anywhere else, which is awesome. Sven Baertschi got a second chance. That's cool too.
Right.
That's wonderful. Best of luck to him.
I'm so happy. I'm very happy for Sven Baertschi, and I noticed that most people in Vancouver,
literally everybody except for like the shitty people that were like, he's always sucked. Those people can fucking suck a fat one.
Good for Sven.
Good for him, and I hope he scores
I hope it works for him. Like I genuinely hope it works for him. Yeah. Provided that he promises not to score any goals against the Canucks, because we can't.
Oh no, I hope he does score hundreds. I hope he gets a hat trick in this one game.
I cannot have him pulling a Tyler Toffoli. No, thank you. Please don't.
That'd be great.
I would really not like that. Thank you.
If he like goes to the Knights and he becomes a 30-goal scorer in the season, that'd be amazing. But yeah, anyway, back to Alex Edler. He's finally done the longest tenured Canuck, highest scoring, most games played. Literally like a Ring of Honor, or at least a retired number candidate. I'm not too sure which one.
I would say Ring of Honor.
Ring of Honor for sure. Like one of the best defensemen the Canucks have ever had. Yeah. No one's the
best defenseman.
Literally the best. Like
you could frankly write you could write an entire article on just like why, like Alex Edler on, in most cases, probably on most other teams, would he maybe be considered the best defenseman of all time? Probably not. But in terms of Vancouver, they very much struggled to find defensemen who can stay for as long and be as serviceable and as important and integral to the team for as long a period as Alex Edler has been. Alexander has been. Like you go back to the 94 team, like none of those guys really were there for very long after the 94 team or even before it. Like there's just not and the 2011 team, like Edler was one of them. And then Christian Ehrhoff might have been if he had stayed. Like he might have been he might have been, but we'll never know. Edler was Edler, and then Tanev to a lesser degree. They were big parts of that. And Edler, it's sad. I know a lot of people are thrilled to see him go based on last year, and like
which is so dumb.
It is like
I get it in the sense like if you thought the Canucks were going to re-sign him to another $60 million contract, like sure, but they were never going to do that.
Yeah,
not at his age.
I really expected him to retire a Vancouver Canuck in every
so did I.
So to see him move on in this way, and where it seems like it's ending so bitterly between them, is very sad.
That sucks.
It's really, really sad. And I'm happy that he's going to go somewhere that he's going to be happy. Hopefully in LA, he's going to be happy there. And like you mentioned, like as far as what his post-career life holds, you hope, Ring of Honor would be perfect. I think retired number you got to hold for like the elite of the elite kind of thing. Yeah. Like Edler was never like the number one defenseman in the NHL or anything by any stretch.
No,
but he was always the number one.
He was always but he was always like Mr. Reliable. He was always like a fantastic defensive defenseman, but also like underrated in his ability to just like consistently produce season after season. Right. And obviously he fell off because that wear and tear after 19 years of being, however many years it is, 20 or 10. I don't. I track stats for a living. 16 or 17 years, whatever the fuck it is. It's a long ass time to be the shutdown guy for the Vancouver Canucks, especially one that's been as porous defensively as the Canucks have been over the last 7 years. So yeah, maybe when he retires in like a couple of years, and if Quinn Hughes moves on, and it's quite clear cut that there isn't going to be a defenseman like him that stays as long as him.
I don't think that's how. I think Quinn Hughes is the. I gotta hope Quinn Hughes is going to be here forever. I mean, Edler is the best defenseman. Edler is the best defenseman as long as Quinn Hughes, until Quinn Hughes takes it. Like, that's just how it's going to go. Like, that's fair. How it is. Yeah,
that's completely fair. I just don't think. I mean, Hughes might have the next step.
Don't you?
He might have.
Say it. How dare you?
I'm just gonna say, Hughes is incredible offensively, and in his rookie year, he looked incredibly well defensively. And then last year, it was like he just forgot how to play defense.
I don't think
I'm hoping
I think that's the outlier. So
I'm hoping he bounces back and he's a great two-way defender again. The team needs him to be.
Yeah, I'd be stunned if that was the norm rather than the outlier.
Yeah.
I think you're good. I think we're good on that one, honestly.
Yeah.
Like,
but you are correct that it's basically like Quinn Hughes' mantle to take up at this point. So otherwise, Alex Edler, we've poured one out for you, buddy. You know, respect, real. There's a lot of people out there that were like mad that his plus minus over his career was low, and it's like, are you fucking kidding me? The guy played almost 1,000 games for the Canucks and was one of their most stable players, but you're mad because his plus minus was bad 1 year. Like, fuck off. Anyway,
it's just recency bias, but at the end of the day. At the end of the day, it's like with Luongo and it's like with Bure to a certain degree, where in the immediate aftermath, people aren't as high on the players they were because they saw them at their very lowest in the franchises in his time with the franchise. I think as we move on, as time goes along, and frankly, I think the minute he comes back to Rogers Arena for that first game back with LA, when they play the video tribute for him and he gets the standing ovation from an actual crowd this time around, and then scores his 100th career goal. I think that will very quickly disappear, and I think you're going to see people welcome him back in a few years with very open arms when he calls it a career.
What if he like re-signs like again afterwards, like for the Canucks, like 1 year, $750K just to get like his 100th goal?
I feel like that's just asking. What if you might as well just ask, what if he becomes Nicholas Lidstrom? I don't think that's happening. I think you're good here. Yeah.
On that note, folks, thank you so much for listening to this absolute unit of an episode. Hopefully, we can record an emergency podcast where we get to talk about Hughes Pettersson and Quinn Hughes' new contracts, but that might not be happening. But otherwise, thanks for tuning into this one. We've got our podcast on Amazon, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, all sorts of podcasting platforms. There's also our YouTube channel where you can subscribe, comment on all our content in video format. You see my disgusting hair that I've got just flowing in the wind right now. It's absolutely atrocious. Then there's our Patreon as well. We have $1 and $5 tiers. Lachlan's always putting out exclusive content for you, the readers, to find out. And we should be having episodes on there shortly where we talk about random shit. I am always Cody Sievertson. You can follow me at Cody Sievertson on Twitter and my website, commentsharvest.com. I might write something. I don't know. It's really nice out, so I'm probably just going to do nothing for the rest of the summer until training camp starts, because that's just kind of the vibe I'm feeling lately.
It's not that far away.
I know that. So this is the funny, like, we were listening to the final Vancast, and they're like, we'll see each other at training camp, which is in like a month. And I was like, oh, right. It's the end of July right now.
I wouldn't mind if this became the norm in terms of when
like super turnaround.
Well, yeah, and I mean, right now, if you look at the way the calendar is set up for the Olympics and everything for next year, it's not going to be all that different. But until next time I write something, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Lach and the Crease, and you can find my writing work at lachandthecrease.com. I posted a thing about the expansion draft. I should have a grades article coming out for the free agency period for the Canucks as well, pretty shortly here as well. And then after that, who knows? There might be some stuff coming pretty
possible
soon for you to be excited about, but we'll see.
Yeah. Till then, folks, thank you guys for listening to this one. As always, the CreaseCast will catch you on the next episode. Bye.
Bye.